Hey there, it's Jeff from Modern Combat and Survival. When it comes to surviving an instant disaster, chances are you won't be at home when tragedy strikes. Your immediate action steps is something I just talked about with Jonathan Hollerman of griddownconsulting.com in our podcast episode. And I have his advice for you coming right up. Now, if you'd like more survival tips, be sure to subscribe and click on the bell so you don't miss a thing. And now, check this out.
All right, Jonathan, so let's go ahead and jump into this now. When we're talking about like an instant disaster, I mean, so many people talk about like emergencies, disasters, and terrorist attacks and things like that, like it's an abstract idea. And what I want to do is I want to talk about the cold, harsh realities when it comes to an instant attack. Those things that, you know, a hurricane you can see coming, right? Like you see the weather reports and all that stuff. It gives you time, but an instant disaster doesn't give you that time. So when people are caught when they don't have warning of a crisis coming, let's start out conceptually. Like, what are maybe like the first 3 actions somebody needs to take just to be able to kind of, you know, set themselves in, set a foundation for their next actions to take?
A lot of this comes down to just having a preparedness mindset and thinking through problems, coming up with solutions to problems. It's hard to There's a lot of top 10, top 3 lists online from different survival experts on do this, do that. The problem is what scenario are we talking about? Are we talking about a bomb going off in New York City? Are we talking about an EMP attack where a good portion of the vehicles aren't working? Are we talking a solar flare, cyber attack on the grid? So there are limited scenarios where it's instant, and I just kind of named them. Pandemic, financial collapse, hurricane, things of that nature. You can see those coming from a mile away. So those are scenarios where if you find yourself not prepared, shame on you because you knew it was coming, right? In the case where it's an instant situation, the first thing you need to do is focus on your personal protection. So if we're talking a bomb going off and your building's on fire, obviously leave the building, follow the crowd, go in the same direction a lot of people are going. There's probably going to be rescue personnel showing up, and just follow instructions. So a lot of people get really in the weeds, and in the case of a scenario like that in New York, they really want to have all this bug out bag gear and everything at their office. But the thing is if it's a localized disaster, there's going to be people coming to help. And if you looked at this in any semblance of your imagination as to what would I do if this happened, that happened, and that's the biggest part of it is game plan it, put it down on paper, think about different scenarios. What would I do under this situation? What would I do under that situation? And have a plan of action in place so you're not just completely taken off guard, which would lead me into the long-term loss of the electric grid, whether that be from an EMP attack by North Korea, which is a very imminent and immediate risk right now, a solar flare, which we're long overdue for, a cyber attack on the electric grid, or just a good old-fashioned physical attack on the electric grid. If we lose the electric grid long-term, a lot of people aren't going to really understand how bad it's going to get. So it is imperative, you know, once you think about personal safety, getting yourself out of the immediate danger area, how do I get home? How do I get back to my family? How do I get back to my other resources? Ideally, you'll have a car in a parking garage or a car in the parking lot that you'll have a get home bag in, that you can get to that, get any immediate action equipment that you will need to get home and get a hold of that. So a lot of it just depends on the situation. So a lot of that just comes down to mindset, thinking through scenarios beforehand, how you're going to react, what you're going to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we talk a lot about mindset, right? And the only thing I would add to that is when you're talking about, you know, we talk about not when an incident happens isn't the best time to try and think about what your plan is, right? So take an example of like you are in a building and you are in, you know, a good example is maybe there was the nightclub fire where everybody just kind of died at the doorway, right? Fire started, and that would be a case where maybe you wouldn't go with the crowd, right? But if you didn't think about your plan ahead of time, you would be like just in panic. If you didn't have a plan, you would just follow the crowd and get stuffed inside of a doorway and probably die of smoke inhalation. Whereas if you had that mindset ahead of time, and anywhere you go, whether it's a restaurant, a nightclub, any building, and you look around and you say, okay, well, there's the exits, but there's where the backstage is. That's where the door to backstage is. And, you know, if something were to happen, would I follow everybody out the front door, or would I go back where I know 7 people are going out the back door where the stage is? That might be a better plan. But if you don't think about that ahead of time, then your mindset is just going to be in panic mode right with everybody else a lot of times.
You're absolutely correct, Jeff. A lot of my focus with my clients and my consulting is around societal collapse scenarios. So you're talking immediate action, localized events. So yeah, the thought process behind that is considerably different. A lot of that's having your head on a swivel, having situational awareness to the situation and the environment that you're in. Perfect example was a nightclub fire. Anytime you go into a large, whether it be a football stadium, something along those lines, not just looking for alternative exits, because in that situation, you don't want to go with the crowd because you're probably going to get trampled trying to get through a 6-foot wide door. You want to pay attention to back doors, windows that you could get yourself and your loved ones out of in a situation. Also looking for potential places of cover. If you're talking about the shooting down in Las Vegas, a lot of the people just sat down on the ground or got behind a chain link fence, and there's a big difference between cover and concealment, as you are well aware of. Where are my locations for cover that can stop a bullet? So keeping an eye on those things. Whenever I go to a restaurant, I always position myself, if we're in a booth, I always position myself facing the front door. Pay attention to people around you. Are they nervous? Is there some guy that's nervous or looking distraught? Don't ignore those types of situations. Pay attention to them. Keep your eye on that individual and see how they're going to react.